Hello everyone. Today I thought for this Music Talk Tuesday I would focus in on songs that are about economic hardship. And what would be my economic hardship? I mean that in a fairly loose sense. The song could maybe talk about at certain points there being like highs and then being lows in sort of a economic sense, or they just being songs that discuss sort of the financial difficulties that people, in particular maybe the narrator of the song, is going through. So they're really intended to sort of give people perspective into different types of songs, which I find to be rather interesting, because even though there's really not a lot of songs that discuss this, I still managed to find some ones that actually sort of speak volumes, and some of them are a little bit well heard of. So without further ado, let me address 4 that stood out to me. The first one is a fairly old song in that it's a little bit more traditional. And it is called Brother Can You Spare a Dime by Jolson. And basically this song is sort of a well-known hit, or was technically a well-known hit during the Great Depression era in the 1930s, in particular in the United States. The narrator sort of begins the song with reminiscing about all the things that he's done for his occupation. Like at one time he worked at the railroad, one time he worked on a tower, another time he talks about his military service, which I'm assuming is during World War I. And it talks about him being, I guess, relatively young at that age. So really he is talking about the times when things were really good, and this would be the time period sort of in the 1920s and early 1900s, where we saw a lot of growth that was going on in the United States, and as well as a lot of wealth. If you read certain books like The Great Gatsby, you'll sort of see how people were able to make a good living, and a lot of people were able to come to America and sort of be productive and sort of have a sense of stability and security. And then he's reminiscing about this throughout a lot of the song, but then at the same time he sort of goes back to where he is now and kind of asks, hey, can you give me some money for all that I've tried to put in and all of the effort that I did working on the railroad, doing the tower, doing my military service, sort of asking, can you spare a dime now for all the things that I've tried to do and accomplish? And it's really sort of tuning into sort of the reality of the situation, in that there was this idea that America was full of hope and promise, and that you could find some kind of normalcy and still feel secure with yourself and with your job. But it seems like that once it hits the narrator that all of the work that he's done is now leaded up to this, it's kind of it's kind of heartbreaking to listen to at times, because he sort of asks now, can you just please spare a dime now? That's all I'm asking for, really, because anything so I can just get something to eat. And he sort of addresses the fact that he has to go and get bread now, and it's not like he can go out and buy bread. He has to go into the soup kitchens, and so it's it's really addressing it through, in particular, the narrator's point of view, and the narrator being fairly desperate with his financial circumstances. The funny thing is that sometimes it sounds sort of like a musical a bit, because at certain points it's almost like he's in between singing and talking, and you'll kind of see this when he asks at some points, "Hey, can you spare a dime? Can you give me something?" Because of the circumstances that he's in. So it's really, I think, touching in onto that traditional way of how people approached sort of the Depression. And really, a dime back then couldn't really buy you much, and obviously it can't buy you much now, but a dime could get you something to eat back in those days. So really, it is asking money just so that he can eat. He's really down to asking just for the necessities in order to survive. So it really touches in onto this history, I think, really well, and at times it almost sounds a little comical with how the way he says it, almost as if like he can't believe that he's in these circumstances, because again, you hear him throughout the song talking about all the grand things that he did, and then now it's all led up to this now, where he virtually doesn't have enough to even eat, so, or enough money to even eat. So really, you do get this real sense of what it was like within the time period, and I really liked that I was able to find this kind of time-oriented piece, because it is a really major part, I guess, of our history, and I think it ties into a lot of people's feelings when there is a financial sort of downturn and there is this lack of security. So it is old-fashioned. It is kind of Broadway-y in how it sort of sounds. There's a points where it seems like he's more talking to the audience rather than singing. But I think it's a song that's fairly effective and old-timey, and I find it to be enjoyable for what it is, and I think it gets its message across fairly well. So even though it's a little simplistic in the way it talks about its lyrics, it really reflects onto the history, and I think tries to tie in also universal aspects as well of how we feel when suddenly the economy turns into a different direction, or turns towards a different direction. So that's that particular song. The next one that I wanted to address is a relatively recent song, and some people are either going to like or dislike this choice, I don't know, but I like this song, and I figure since it is about these economic sort of hardships, I figured it definitely would be worth addressing in this list. So this song is called Take a Walk by Passion Pit. Now, regardless of whether you dislike or like Passion Pit, there's a lot actually going on within the lyrics of this song. It's almost sort of telling a story. It starts off with the narrator talking about how he's traveled to another country. I'm assuming that country is the United States. And it should be noted that there have been a lot of people saying, I guess, on the internet that it was about the vocalists, the vocalist of Passion Pit's, or it was intended to talk about the vocalist of Passion Pit's family. So he's talking about, in particular, his father and grandfather, sort of, because we're displaying sort of these kinds of roles, and then that he's the sort of the head of the household, the man of the household. So, again, I think if we're talking about the grandfather and father, it would probably be the grandfather as the one who's kind of sort of narrating the song. But again, this is open to speculation. I'm not sure if what people have been saying on the internet is fairly accurate. But I'm assuming that it is, because it seems like a lot of people like to address the fact that it's talking about the vocalist's family history. But again, I think it's definitely open to whoever wants to interpret it however way. But basically, the narrator sort of discusses, again, sort of moving to the United States or a particular country that's well off, which I'm basically assuming is the United States, at least for the time period that his grandfather and father would probably be around. And basically, he talks about how he's really selling things on the street at first, and then he manages to marry and save some money, and then his family members, they are able to come over, but then they end up still taking separate paths and sort of developing their own lives in different locations, and that he sees them once a year for a week. And then that's basically the first verse, and then the second verse goes, the market's not doing well, and the narrator is really aware of this, and suddenly his mother-in-law wants to move in, and then he's sort of scared about how he can support everybody, and the narrator's partner ends up calling and saying that the pension funds are gone, and the partner also made some bad investments, and so the counts are overdrawn, and that basically sort of means that, yeah, I did some bad stuff, and now we're broke. But it also mentions too in the beginning that the market is not at its most stable as maybe previously, once he started sort of getting his life together. But at the same time, the narrator is fairly insecure with his situation, and he wants to hide it as much as possible as he can from his family. So he tries to feel secure by telling his wife to, make something for the neighbors, everything will be normal. And try to cook dinner, and we'll talk about taxes, and we'll talk about how the world we live in is so great. He really tries to paint this illusion that things are okay, and it does mention again his son at one point. So if you're interpreting this from the grandfather-father perspective of it actually being about the vocalist's family, then it kind of mentions too how it's implied that the narrator it really cares for his family, and that the fact that he can't provide this kind of happiness that they've created makes him very very frightened and scared, and doesn't know what to do. And at one point in the lyrics it says, "I'm just too much a coward to admit when I'm in need." So basically, he's so insecure and so incapable of facing the truth that he can't accept the fact that they probably can't live in that lifestyle. And it also probably has to do with the fact that he's afraid that he'll lose his family, and that his family will leave him because he can't make the money to support them. So that's really a really big issue, and I think the song addresses it well. And it's really heartbreaking to see how, when you really look at the lyrics, even though it kind of sounds very escapey and maybe a little bit more upbeat at times, it does feel like that there's this really dark undertone to the song that you can just see through the lyrics, and sort of, I guess, too, in the way the singer says certain things. Like when he says, "I'm just too much a coward to admit when I'm in need," he actually kind of sounds like he's going to have a little bit of a breakdown. So really, it seems like the he is trying to, that the vocalist was trying to display sort of the emotions that the narrator was going through, and trying to give you that sense of what he was facing within his financial life, and how that affects the family as a whole. Now, within each verse, there's this saying that goes, "I took a walk, take a walk, take a walk," and it refers to what the narrator does after each verse, and he basically takes a walk, and it's sort of him trying to escape his problem. Like, suddenly when the mother-in-law moves in, he's like, "Oh, I need to take a walk now. I need to get away from this." So there is really this sense of escapism in the song, and you'll kind of see this, I think, too, in the video, as well as in the way the song sounds, that there's really a desire for the narrator to escape his circumstance, to try to somehow hide and not face it. So there's really that issue going on. And there is this kind of debate as to whether this song at the end, when he says "take a walk," if it's to the point where he commits suicide, because the situation has gotten so bad that he can't deal with it anymore, so he just loses it. And I don't know if this is fairly accurate. I'm not sure if this is what the artists intended. It's just something that people, I think, like to bring up with this song, because they say in the music video that at one point you'll see somebody, you'll kind of see the camera move and just jumping and then take a walk, and sort of, takes the final walk sort of off a building. So that's how kind of like the music video ends. And so I think people assume, oh, okay, he did go out and he did at least attempt to take his life. But I think that's definitely up for debate. You could say whether or not, hey, maybe I'm taking a walk, but then at that end moment I realize maybe I shouldn't hide from this anymore. Maybe I should try to see what I can do. So it could be interpreted that way as well. Like at the end he has this epiphany, like, aha, okay, I've walked for too long. It's time for me to face it. Or it could mean the opposite. So again, this is definitely open for interpretation. I'm sure there's people who will feel that maybe one approach is maybe more appropriate than the other. But again, completely open to your ideas. But I find how the song is interesting and how it sort of tells a story of somebody going through the sort of stages of being sort of happy with his family and his financial circumstances, and how it sort of just takes a nosedive. And the other song sort of does this in a similar way, the previous one that I mentioned, Can You Spare a Dime, but it does it in a way where it's just sort of reminiscing of how great the time was before the whole economy turned down. It's really a past versus present song, and this one's almost sort of going through with you the entire story, the whole way through. And then Can You Spare a Dime is a little bit more of thinking about the past and then how it's really bad now. So two different approaches, but with fairly similar ideas of time and putting in good and bad aspects of their financial circumstances out there. So that's that song. Now the next one that I'm going to briefly discuss is a song that is probably a little bit more well known, and this song is called Fast Car by Tracy Chapman. And basically this song deals with financial instability in a different way. The narrator basically discusses how she's lived a poor life. Her father was an alcoholic, and her mother left him, and then she sort of had to take care of him, and that's why she's quit school, and she's worked basically hard all her life to make money and try to get out of the state that she's in. And then she meets this man who has a fast car, and this man ends up sort of becoming her lover in a way, but he's sort of similar to her father in that he doesn't support her. He goes out and drinks, and he drives the car really fast, but at the same time she sort of has this kind of hope, like that things will get better, and she kind of she there's like at one point where her lover's driving the car and he's driving it really fast, but then she's like, I have a feeling like I belong, I have a feeling like I could be someone, sort of, she's trying to find a sense of normalcy, but at the same time the reality is kind of different in that her lover has chosen to make some bad decisions, and that's resulted in him not contributing to being financially stable. So you'll kind of see that happen, and towards the end of the song, the lyrics go, you gotta make a decision, like she's telling her lover, you gotta make a decision, leave tonight or live and die this way. Now I think this could be interpreted fairly different ways because it's not really specific. It could be either leave me, or you're going to live in or maybe I think it's probably more to the idea of she wants to get out of the place that they're in, and she wants to make something better. So she says that that he has a choice. He can either leave tonight with her, or he could live and die the way he's been living, with drinking alcohol and not contributing anything to society. So really it's a song that I think hits home, and it's fairly soothing at times, but still sad, and on the other side hopeful. So there's a lot of emotions that I think go into this song, and I like how it addresses the financial circumstances in that, and how they not only just affect our careers, they really do intertwine with our personal lives, and they really affect the ways that we see people in our personal lives. In a similar way to Take a Walk, but in a way Take a Walk is different because he's sort of running away from his problems, and I think she's trying to too, but she sort of realizes that she can't do it anymore, and that she needs to move on. She needs to find a way in where she can survive. So it is kind of that these interesting similarities, I think, that are within the songs that make it all that more relatable. But at the same time, this one is rather unique in that it's talking about how she sort of ends up in the same circumstances and not moving on from her past. Whereas Take a Walk is sort of going through somebody's life, and how there was like this sort of roller coaster going on. So this one, I think, does things in a rather different way, in that she was always in the same circumstances, and just not realizing it. So that's really this song. I think that's really all I can address from it for the most part. It has its touching moments, and I think a lot of people relate to it, so definitely worth checking out. So the last song that I am going to briefly discuss is another song by Phil Collins, but again, regardless of whether or not you like Phil Collins, I still think that this song holds a good message for financial hardship, and discusses financial hardship in a rather interesting way than all of the other previous songs that I've mentioned. So basically, this song is about a woman sort of crying for help. Like, you'll basically hear that throughout the entire song. This woman's like, I need help, but nobody wants to help her at all. And it's mostly well-to-do people that have many fortunes in life that don't want to help her. And Phil Collins, being the narrator, I guess, here sort of says, think twice, because it's another day for you and me in paradise. So he's sort of saying how there is this paradise that we have, where technically certain people have, where they have financial stability, where they have really no economic hardship. But there's all these other people who do, and those other people that do look at our sort of world, or the world of people who have financial stability, and think that's sort of paradise. That's where they want to be. So it's really trying to sort of enforce a lesson in saying, think twice. There's other people out there who have it way harder than you do. So it's really trying to be an ethically based song, and trying to teach you a lesson, and that be fortunate in what you have, and don't take things for granted, and maybe actually reach out to people and appreciate what you have. And so it's fairly simplistic in what it's trying to say, but at the same time it does it in an effective way. I like how the music sounds sort of haunting, but at the same time, when Phil Collins almost says think twice, he's almost saying it as if he's talking, like it's kind of like an order, just think twice, because it's really a day for you and me in paradise. It's another day where you get to have all of this financial, economic stability, where you don't have to worry about maybe going hungry, or worrying about what will happen to your family. So really, that's what this song, I think, is trying to get across. It's fairly simple, but I think effective, and I like that it sort of tries to be a song that's sort of teaching the audience a lesson, and it just has a different approach of explaining sort of economic hardship than the other songs, where the other songs sort of focus in on one person, whereas Phil Collins is, I think, more addressing not just the woman that he talks about in the song, but just everybody else in general who's not in this paradise. So really, I think that's all I can say about these songs. They're fairly straightforward. They just needed me, they just required me to sort of dive into and explain in order for you to get a sense of what they're trying to represent and explain when it comes to financial hardship or economic hardship. And I think they do it in a way that's effective and relatable to people. So I think that's really all I can say as a whole about these songs. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. And thank you so much. And goodbye, everybody.